The movie starts with two sisters, Cleo and Molly, heading to their high school. Cleo is basically invisible at school, living in the shadow of her more popular and visible sister. Molly is a bit of an outsider, while Molly is outspoken and is recognized by everyone at school. Despite the fact that she is hardly recognized by pupils at school, Cleo is an excellent student. That afternoon, Cleo falls asleep in class, and her science teacher, Mr. Perkins, wakes her up by tapping on her headphones. Mr. Perkins talks about her recent science assignment, which he is not satisfied with. The kind and encouraging teacher sees her potential in science, and decides she needs a challenge for her class project. She is to determine a mystery substance and transform it into its crystal state. Later, Cleo talks about it with her only friend, George, who says that the project is hard but not impossible. Heading outside, a bully makes fun of Cleo for her emo-style outfit. However, our heroine couldn't care less, so she ignored him. Another kid named Carter, who seems to have a crush on Cleo, asks her if they can study together. Cleo shrugs him off in a somewhat mean way. When George asks her why she did that, Cleo says she believes Carter just wants to toy around with her. Next, her sister Molly approaches Cleo and offers a ride back home with her extroverted friends. Cleo decides she's going with George and gives a hard pass to the offer. She then returns home riding in the back of the slowest scooter driven by George. Cleo learns that her parents are going on a Halloween trip for a week. After the parents scoot away, Molly tells her she's hosting a dinner party for her lacrosse team. Cleo says that she has to study, and Molly sarcastically tells her that it will just be a few people, her friends, their boyfriends, and other people who want to join the party. Cleo is clearly furious, but she can't do anything about it. As expected, the party is loud, crowded, and really annoying for Cleo as she works on the science experiment in her room. She mixes some chemicals, which start to form a strange steam. A moth flies by and distracts Cleo, causing her to accidentally spill unknown chemicals into her solution. The steam produced ends up turning the moth invisible, leading Cleo to chase its shadow around the house full of guests before it gets away. Poor Cleo looks sad and defeated as she returns to her experiment. Later, while Molly says goodbyes to her friends, Cleo and George chat on the porch. Cleo asks him if she believes she made the moth invisible, much to her disappointment. George just says that she needs some rest and leaves for home. At night, while Molly is preparing for bed, the moth returns attracted to the light from the bathroom. The insect flies too close to the light, gets killed by it, and falls into a cup of water containing an antacid Molly is about to drink. She then unknowingly drinks the water with a moth, which then makes her invisible. The next morning, Molly is horrified when she's in the bathroom and cannot see her reflection in the mirror. Cleo is alerted when she hears her sister scream. She then goes to the bathroom to check on Molly, but nobody is there. As a result, both the sisters freak out, and Molly, who is identified only by a transparent shadow, runs away. Cleo finally gets what's happening and mentions to her invisible sister that she was working on a sugar solution the other day at the party when she spilled some unknown chemicals. It accidentally made the moth disappear. Molly then realizes that she may have swallowed that moth. Just then, Molly's boyfriend, Dan, arrives in a bear costume to surprise her. He asks Cleo if he can see her girlfriend, but she says that her sister is sick and makes him leave. Cleo then tells Molly that the invisibility should wear off after a few hours, so she should stay at home today. But Molly must attend school to participate in the season opener for her lacrosse team, which college scouts will be watching. She then wears a blue dress and bows to slightly showcase her visibility, but a few seconds later, that dress starts disappearing as well. Molly then comes up with an idea. She has Cleo wear a Halloween costume and pretend to be her at school. When they get to school, Molly begins to coach Cleo on how to walk and act like Molly's best friend. Nikki mentions that she's looking somewhat paler today. Cleo, pretending to be her sister, says that she's sick, which is also the reason why her voice sounds different today. When Molly's boyfriend Dan greets her, Cleo immediately avoids him by saying she has to attend a class. She then gets a call from George, who agrees to cover for her in class. After this, she tells the invisible Molly that they have to go to the lab to get the situation fixed. But since Molly must attend her first class, which is geometry, Cleo is forced to do what her big sister says. In geometry class, Cleo learns that Molly has been doing poorly in the subject. She later confronts her sister, telling her that she should have asked for help if she had trouble with her studies. Molly, as usual, replies sarcastically, saying that she doesn't need help. Cleo ignores her and urges her to get the big microscope from the lab so they can figure out a solution to the invisibility. But Molly says that Cleo must attend a pep circle for the lacrosse team, which is a bonding ritual for all the players. Later, while Cleo pretends to be Molly and attends the pep circle, Molly grabs a microscope from the science classroom so Cleo can figure out how to make her visible again. In the next scene, Cleo is welcomed by a group hug, which totally freaks her out. She's then forced to play the circle of trust, where the one holding the bunny of truth can safely share their feelings of truth about themselves. Nikki starts off the game by saying that she's grateful to be on a team with them and that she is strong because she's surrounded by such strong women. She's especially grateful for her best friend Molly as she's always there to support her no matter how crazy life gets. Hearing all this, the real Molly, who is watching everything from afar, smiles. Then Nikki gives the bunny of truth to Cleo, who says that she's thankful for sitting down as the dress she's wearing is a chafing hazard. She then passes the bunny to the next person, but Nikki is unconvinced with her. So she encourages her to share an emotional truth. The bunny is passed back to Cleo again, but she simply says that she's doing great before passing it on to the next person. Annoyed, Nikki drags her to the center, telling her that this is a safe place to share and reminding her that they love her. Cleo finally breaks out, telling everyone that she is not the girl that everyone thinks, not the beautiful shining star everyone believes her to be. She continues to say that she's actually the kind of girl who no one notices. This prompts everyone to give Cleo a second group hug, and at the same time, Molly opens the door and silently leaves. Molly then goes to the lab to get the microscope. In the process, she hears Carter talking with George about Cleo. Carter asks why Cleo is always so rude as she brushes him off every time he tries to talk to her. After securing the microscope in Cleo's locker, Molly heads back to the pep talk and drags her sister out of it. She then tells Cleo about the cute guy Carter, who apparently likes her. Cleo shrugs her off once again, saying that he is not really into her because she believes she is not his type. Shortly after, Molly follows Dan, who is still wearing the bear costume. While he's in the bathroom, she manages to steal the costume, pretending to be Cleo, and now wearing the bear costume. Molly returns to the lab and secures a date for her sister by asking Carter out. When the costume starts disappearing, Molly runs out of the lab and bumps into her sister in the hallway. Cleo then drags Molly inside a room and asks for an explanation. Molly tells her that she asked Carter out, and while they're talking, George walks in. The boy is clearly surprised as he sees the half-disappearing bear costume. Cleo explains everything to him. When suddenly Dan walks in as well and questions why Molly has been constantly avoiding him, George and Cleo walk out of the room, ignoring poor Dan. George then says to Molly that she has a big crush on Nikki. In response, she reveals that Nikki dates nice guys like George, so he should approach her later. The trio decides to leave her home and try to figure out why the invisibility hasn't worn out yet, but Molly says that she just can't skip her lacrosse game, so she forces Cleo to pretend to be her again in the lacrosse game. Cleo has a rough start but slowly gets into the game with Molly's help, resulting in a victory for the team. In the meantime, George finally asks Nikki out and secures a date for himself. Once back at home, Cleo tries to figure out why the invisibility hasn't worn off yet. Upon observing Molly's cells under the microscope, she and George conclude that the invisibility will become permanent unless they can formulate an antidote before midnight, which is 24 hours after Molly swallows the moth. This is why they need to reproduce the results from Cleo's earlier experiment. Next, the sisters go to a cemetery to catch another moth, while George goes to school to set up the experiment. But Molly's dissatisfaction with her invisibility grows while she's in the cemetery, resulting in a furious altercation with her sister. Cleo apologizes and admires Molly's light. She also admits to being jealous since her lack of participation makes her feel invisible at school. After they make up and manage to catch a moth for the experiment, the girls board a trolley to school. On the way, Molly tells Cleo that she understands how she feels invisible, but she also envies Cleo's intelligence because she knows her popularity is brief. Cleo tells Molly that her light is about more than just popularity. When they get to school and meet George, they realize they need to get past the security guard. Molly scares the security away with her invisibility, allowing Cleo and George to enter and replicate Cleo's original experiment. The solution is too complex for Cleo or George to comprehend. And they realize they need help from Carter, a gubernatorial scholar, to analyze the results. Next, they seek him out at the school's annual Halloween party. In the process, Cleo runs into Dan, who is worried sick about his relationship with Molly. He needs to be convinced Molly cares for him. Having had enough, Cleo finally tells him the truth about his sister. She then finds Carter, who is disappointed with her confused feelings because he expected them to be together at the party. After explaining the situation, she brings him to a nearby barn where her sisters, Dan, and George are gathered. In the next scene, Cleo, George, Carter, and Dan work together to develop an antidote for Molly, narrowly missing the midnight deadline. When Mr. Perkins, the party's in charge, discovers them in the barn, Molly informs him about Cleo's experiment before swallowing the antidote. The plan fails at first, not because midnight had passed, but because Molly had taken some antacid the night before when she ate the moth. When Cleo learns of this, she quickly adds a dosage of it to the antidote. And miraculously, Molly becomes visible again. Mr. Perkins, who is astounded by Cleo's study results, invites her to discuss her findings at a seminar of the New Orleans Association of Applied Scientists. When she shares her findings, Cleo is applauded by the scientists present at the seminar, making for a happy ending.